Hey, it's Kevin McCarthy, and welcome to another day in real estate. Today I want to talk about 1031 exchanges because it's fresh on my mind right now. I'm in the middle of a 4-property exchange, and now is the time of year when people really start looking at what are they going to do with that extra money. Let's maybe offload something, move it into something else, and make some changes towards the end of the year that are advantageous for tax season for next year. So for starters, what is a 1031 exchange? Well, it's the exchange of like-kind property. Basically to avoid capital gains tax on a property that would be subject to capital gains tax. Now that's a whole nother discussion on whether a property is subject to capital gains tax and how it becomes subject to capital gains tax. But let's say it's a long-term investment property that you have, or a property that you owned for a while. Maybe you lived in it for a while and then you turned it into a rental, and it's been a rental long enough that now it's subject to capital gains tax. That's the most common. And the most common is exchanging one for one. You sell this property, you take the $100,000 worth of gains from this property, move it into the exchange, and you buy another property with it. That's the basic gist of it. There are some rules around the capital gains, or around the 1031 exchange and how it works. The most recent one that I'm doing, we're selling one property that was subject to capital gains tax and buying multiple properties. And that can be done. The identification rules can be stringent, so it's a little bit difficult to pull this off. I managed to get it done in a short period of time. It was quite a race, but we got it done. So let's take the basics, right? You've got a house that you paid $150,000 for, and you sell it for $300,000. However many years later, you've got $150,000 in gains that go into the 1031 exchange. And you do that when you close. You move the money into an intermediary that holds that fund, so you don't touch it at all. Because if you touch it, if you receive those funds at all, then they become taxable at that point. Now you have 45 days from the time that property closes in order to identify which properties or property you're going to buy. And there's 3 different rules on this. There's the 3 property rule. You can identify 3 properties. It doesn't matter what their value is. It just has to be like kind. The second rule is the 200% rule. And with that rule, you can identify as many properties as you want to, but the total number of properties that you identify cannot exceed 200% of the property that you relinquished or sold. And it's not the properties you close on, it's the properties you identify in that 45-day period. So, let's say you sold a property for $300,000 and you wanted to identify multiple properties. You could identify 3 $200,000 properties. That'd be cutting it close. You probably want to go like 190 just to be on the safe side, so there wasn't any discrepancy of value. But that's all you can identify during that period. And whatever you identify on, you have to close. The IRS, absolutely, there is no leeway in this whatsoever. There is no time frames that go beyond the 45 days. There is no extensions. Doesn't matter if it's a holiday, death in the family, they don't care. You got 45 days to identify the properties. That's it, right? The third rule, which is the least used rule and I haven't been subject to it ever, and it's least used because it's not very favorable, is the 95% rule. The 95% rule says you can identify any number of properties. Doesn't matter what their value is. It can be, you can identify $1 million worth of properties after selling a $300,000 house. However, you have to close on 95% of whatever you identify, which basically means if you identify the properties, you have to close on all of them or the exchange is defunct. So the next rule in the 1031 exchange is the 180-day rule. And basically you have 180 days to close on the properties that were identified during the 45-day rule. I know that seems a little bit strange because usually we close on a property in 30 to 45 days. So the 180-day rule, it's really there only for if you're going to buy a new construction property as a replacement property, to give them enough time to build the property and get it closed out. That's really all that rule is. The 45-day rule is the most important rule that there is. So you have to identify the property in 45 days. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's, holidays, weekends, doesn't matter. There's no extensions, death in the family. Who cares? The IRS doesn't care. That's it. 45 days to identify your properties, right? We finished this last one at 11:30. It just has to be identified before midnight on the 45th day from the closing date in order to get it done. So, the basic gist of it is, when you're doing a 1031 exchange, you want to make sure that you follow the timelines and you follow those guidelines absolutely properly. That way your funds don't become subject to taxation. And this time of year is a great time of year to go out and locate some 1031 exchange properties. There's quite a bit of property on the market under $200,000 right now that make fantastic rental properties. Here from Leander, Round Rock, Hutto, Pflugerville. Last year, you couldn't get one of those properties without getting into a multiple offer situation. Supplies caught up with demand. So, the turnkey properties, they still sell, multiple offers, $5,000, $10,000 over list price, they're gone. But if the property needs a little bit of work, and you can come in and put $2,000 or $3,000 into it, you can save $10,000 or more buying the property. I mean, we contracted on one here in Leander that should have been $215 probably, and we got it for $185 because it just was basic. I mean, it wasn't anything too, the carpet's nasty, it needs paint, stuff like that. I can get my guys in there, we can take care of that property for $3,000 to $4,000. It's going to look fantastic. It'll be a great rental property for this investor. So, if you're interested in getting into an investment, or you're interested in doing a 1031 exchange and maybe moving some money from one property to another this fall, give me a call. I am ready and I have time to help you out. Looking forward to hearing from you.